Welcome and step into the minds of addiction and recovery. Hello, I'm your host, Brett C. It is an honor to bring into light one of the darkest aspects of our society, addiction. With 20 years of active addiction and 20 years of sobriety, I hope to bring together all listeners on a journey of inspiration and education. With my co-hosts Jarrod F. and Rich J., we will be sharing our experience, strength, and hope for all listeners to enjoy and have fun with. Now, F3 Recovery brings you the Super Sober Podcast. All right. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Super Sober Podcast. Thanks for taking the time for listening for the other three podcasts. We really appreciate all the feedback and everything. So we're going to start right off the top. My name is Brett C. My sobriety date is 4/21/03. I am an RN with a BSN, a bachelorate in nursing. I have, like I said in the intro, 20 years of active addiction and 20 years of sobriety. Yay me. And we're going to go to the left.
My name is Rich J. My recovery date is October 5th, 2013. I've been working in substance abuse treatment since 2014. I'm currently in nursing school. I'm one semester away from graduating. And I also teach boxing at a treatment center now, 1 day a week.
My name is Jarrod F. Sobriety date is still July 4th, 2015. Forever grateful for that. And my credential is I'm a KDAC 2, and I work in an acute medical detox in a hospital.
All right, now we got some qualifications to be on a podcast. Here we go. We're going to move right into three different subjects today. We're going to add on to a little bit more fun for the listeners and the viewers with a couple shout outs and some calls to action and a couple more fun little snippets for you guys to keep you engaged for an hour-long podcast. The first we're going to do here, the last one that we did, we introduced our mascot, which is here on the table right here, our guy, Jails, Institutions, and Death. We were going to shout out to the audience to get a name for him, but it seems like everybody's kind of sticking with notorious J.I.D, Mr. Jid. So for Jails, Institutions, and Death, but definitely we want to shout out to the audience. Maybe someone's got a better name for our first mascot in recovery. I don't know if I've ever seen a mascot of recovery. We're talking like 83 years of AA and a whole bunch of years of NA and everything. I've never seen a mascot. So here we go. We're brave enough to say here he is riding the dragon today. He'll be doing different poses on each podcast. And we're going to show you some old school stuff about how long the Grim Reaper, Mr. Death, he's been around. Here's him with some of his old homeboys back in the day, the Riders of the Apocalypse right here. If you guys weren't sure with him, he's a death, terror, bewilderment, or pestilence and famine are his other homies right there. So he's been around. He's mostly independent contracting these days with addiction and the rise of all these problems going on. So I don't know what his other three homies are doing right now. I think they're just waiting around for the end times and stuff. So maybe he'll hang out with him later. But pretty much he's just our boy now. A good representative of what's waiting for us if we don't keep on giving it away. And here on the Super Sober Podcast, that's what we do. We're giving it away. We've gotten a lot of good feedback lately, and we appreciate everybody out there in listener land and watching land on YouTube. Just know if you go to the F3 Recovery website, you'll be able to go and see all the different links and stuff like that we have up there for YouTube, Spotify. There'll be a Buzzsprout link, and then now you can contact us also. For anybody, we appreciate if you have any ideas, comments, what's going on. We make some misquotes because we know a lot of people in AA are really type A. So we're going to just shout it out now. We don't know everything, and we'll say that for sure. So you can contact us at info@supersoberpodcast.org, info@f3recovery.org. So you have any questions for Rich or Jarrod or just anything, just let us know how we're doing, or if you want us to cover future topics or future guests. So as we're going into the fourth episode, there's been a whole bunch of people that have come out and want to be guests on here. So at some point after you get used to us, there will be other guest things will come about, and we're always looking for having a little bit more fun.
Yeah. I mean, even just asking a question, like when we can answer it during an episode, so that way the other viewers can see, or we can also just answer it directly if you would like that. We can answer it privately or on the podcast. But I think it'd be cool to have some questions come in, and then things
Right.
that, because then that kind of engages the audience, and it also allows us to like spread the answer, whatever way we answer that question. It allows us to spread that to the other viewers, which I think would be a really nice dynamic to have here.
Right. That means you guys are going to have to start answering some emails though. They start coming through. So,
Yeah, I'm good with that.
all right, cool.
Bring them.
Yeah.
All right. So, our first topic we're going to be going into right here is hitting bottom. We've already talked about barriers to recover, stigma, and biases. We've introduced how it is to self diagnose with this program. We've had a shout out to our mothers on the second one so
Yeah.
far, and that was a really nice one. Where you're at, how to be interactive of what's going on now, not 3 months from now, not a year from now. We're talking about building your new life now, wherever you're at, wherever you are in your life. If you're a newcomer at 16 years old or you're an old timer at 80 plus, we're it's time to get going on things. So that's what we've been covering so far. So now we're just going to keep segueing up, I think, as we go forward here. And the next one would be hitting rock bottom. So the notion is widespread that you have to be at a certain level of hitting rock bottom. I mean, in the beginning of AA, what they would talk about, they only worked with the worst of the alcoholics because they were the most receptive. Now into 2023, I mean, people are getting sober younger and younger. They're getting clean younger and younger, and it's very prevalent. So we were going to move into this topic right here, and everybody's rock bottom is different. And there's a lot of stuff you can search on the internet that'll just give you a baseline understanding of what we're going to go through here. So for me, rock bottom, I hit rock bottom and kept on turning that rock bottom into gravel and sand and kept going. I didn't know how much farther I could actually go down the level, but I was working on it. So a lot of us in addiction are so adaptable. We're so adaptable. We can adapt to so many different things. I mean, we basically survived ourselves in outside circumstances in normal areas where people wouldn't survive even the littlest amount, which we've touched on in previous podcasts. So uh, if it wasn't for them raising the bottom and then getting this out here, because I'm a product of the institutions and different treatment programs, drug court, and all that, that softened me enough to get me to a point to where I could really get this thing.
Mm.
So I'm on my last chance. If a lot of you viewers out there can understand that you're on your last chance, um, that's where I'm at, and I'm taking full advantage of it. And uh, rock bottom can be the firm foundation which you start the rest of your life, and that's a
Absolutely.
famous saying from J.K. Rowling, who wrote the what did she write the Harry Potter series.
Yeah.
That's one of her favorite quotes, famous quotes. So um, for me, I love the part where I come in and I see youngsters come in, and they only have maybe 6 months to a year of their war story going, and then they look at the history of their family and what's going on, and they're just jumping into recovery and eating it up and changing their lives. They're like, oh, this is enough.
Dude, I know a girl who got clean at 15,
Hmm.
and now she's like 24, and she's just killing it. She sponsors a bunch of girls and no hiccups, And it was just
Wow.
incredible to see that. Really incredible to
nine
see that.
years.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Her dad's in recovery too, which I think is helpful for sure. But so I mean, just that just goes to show you that really anybody can do this. I've also seen people 70 years old coming in,
Hmm.
and so and like you said, there really is people getting clean younger, people getting clean older now. Recovery's made available to more people now. It's able to reach more people, and so it's awesome. One of the things that I want to point out with the rock bottom thing and how it is different for everybody is that sometimes in sometimes when you go into a 12-step meeting, you'll hear people say things like, "Here's my I qualify," and then so what that does though is that can exclude other people. right? So like if somebody shares that they're like a heroin addict and they're like, that's my qualification. As far as I know, in most 12-step recovery, the only desire or the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop whatever it is you're doing. And so there's no qualification. Like you're a member when you say you're a member, and your bottom is your bottom. So um, eh, because I can come into a meeting, and if I hear all these people talking about how they went to prison, and I haven't been to prison yet, then I feel like I don't belong, and that's just not the case. Your bottom is your bottom when you say it's your bottom, and you belong when you say you belong. And so I just want to make that clear right out the gate because that's super important. That excludes a lot of people from 12-step meetings, and there is no such thing as a fucking qualification. There isn't. There really isn't. There's nothing that says you had
Yeah.
to engage in this behavior, and this behavior for you to be a member.
Right.
So I just want to make that clear right out the gate. Your bottom is your bottom. My bottom was my bottom, and I had to work through. And I was pretty gnarly. I was a pretty gnarly addict, but there was still things that I hadn't done yet, and like I'd never been to jail, but I was using very hard drugs and sticking needles in my arms and doing all that, but I had never been to jail. So even me walking into a meeting, because I hadn't been to jail yet, I struggled with the idea that I belonged. And that's even worse for a person who, let's just say you really struggle with smoking weed and you can't stop smoking weed. And then you walk into a meeting and you hear people, I was a prostitute, I was this, I was that. Don't let that exclude you, because them saying that isn't them saying that you don't belong. And then, like I said, you'll hear people put their own spin on things and say that, I qualify or this is my qualifier, and it's just not the case. So that's what I got on that piece right now.
All right. I'm really glad that we brought this topic up. Before we started, we were talking a little bit about catchphrases that people will hear in
Yeah.
programs and stuff. This is definitely one of them. Everybody's bottom is different. And there is an AA circuit speaker, used to be, I don't know where he's at now, named Mickey. And he did an entire talk on this. And it was one of those things. This is one of the things I love about being sober and being involved in the program is if my mind's open, my views can change on
Right.
things. And I love it because this is one of the topics too, by the way, that does keep people out, right? Because what's the first thing someone does when they walk into a meeting? They walk in there, they look around, they've already got a preconceived notion of what it is to be an alcoholic or what it is to be an addict, right? And like you're talking about with the qualifications, people are, they're going to hear this stuff and go, shit, I got some digging to do still. Clearly I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not there yet,
Yeah, because you're already looking for a reason.
Yeah. Like this can get way worse. I still got time, which is
My story's not developed enough yet.
right. And that's a deadly mindset to have anymore with fentanyl, right?
Oh,
People that think they still got to dig some more just die. So it's scary. So here's I listened to Mickey talk about hitting bottoms, and his argument essentially was that can't be true, that everybody's bottom cannot be different. And then he raised the question of, so what is it to hit bottom? So if I was to ask you right now in a snippet, what was your bottom?
I had nothing left, financially, spiritually.
Okay.
know.
So you're
Spiritually, I mean, really, that's the biggest.
okay.
piece.
So you're a little farther along
Mhm.
than most people that get that question asked to them. What was your bottom?
just being broken in the right enough way.
Yeah. Okay. Also, a guy that's been sober many years,
Mhm.
right? Most of the time, when you ask somebody what was your bottom, they will rattle off at least one, but often a list of outside circumstances.
Mm.
I lost my job. My wife left me. My kids won't
Yeah.
talk to me. Stuff like that, right?
Oh yeah.
So Mickey's whole argument, on this thing is that everybody's outside circumstances are different. Ultimately, though, all of our bottoms are exactly the same. And why I said you guys are a little bit farther along in your recovery is because you've had some time, you're treated, you've worked steps. So you know that hitting bottom is like when I describe my bottom, I can describe it physically with what I was going through in my body,
Mhm.
sitting in detox. And what that was is right in my gut right here, I felt like I had a vacuum that was pulling me straight into myself, like I was imploding to infinity behind me, that could not be filled with anything except for a stomach full of Norco. It was the only thing that would fill it up. The emotional bottom, right? The spot where I was at, where it was like I couldn't imagine continuing to use because it wasn't working anymore. I couldn't keep enough of them around. I was literally without solution. That's the
Yep.
bottom. And so this guy's argument is, so that when we talk about going into a 12-step program, stuff like that, and working steps. So if the solution to everybody's problem is the same for the most part, right? Like a lot of people end up in 12-step programs and it works. Then everybody's bottom ultimately has got to be the same, right? So it's just something just a different perspective to chew on a little bit and
Definitely
think about.
looking for the commonality.
Yeah, and the commonality.
Common point.
And that's the common thread. So when we talk about, your first year of sobriety is filled with physical sobriety. How am I not going to get loaded today? That's the biggest thing you can think. Only thing you can think about. How am I not going to get loaded?
Right.
And then after that, for the rest of your life, hopefully, and as long as you're sober, you're going to be dealing with emotional sobriety, right? So fixing all that stuff is a huge process. But look within when you're thinking about your bottom. And if you listen to anybody that can share about what they were going through on an emotional, spiritual level at their bottom, and they can share about it, I can promise you're going to relate to those feelings. And that's the common thread.
That's
right?
true.
So
That is true. Because as soon as you said that feeling that you had in detox, and there was just nowhere for me to go. There was nothing left for me to do but die, is what it felt like.
Yeah.
And that's what it was for me. There was I couldn't get high anymore for financial reasons and I just physically just couldn't get high anymore. I wasn't able to make things happen. My hustle was done.
You're tired, man.
And internally I had no drive to no drive to live and no drive to continue doing what I was doing also. So I was just kind of at this point where it's like all there was left to do was to either get clean or die. That's what the feeling was.
Yeah.
Because there was no continuing, really. I don't think there was a fork in the road. It was like this point where I hit where I ran out. I ran out. And I'm grateful I hit that point before it took me out. Because some people don't.
Yeah.
I think. And
see, and that's what I'm talking about. When you share that, like in every cell of my being, I go, yeah, yep, can relate. Like that's what bonds us, especially in the beginning. And that's what a newcomer that walks into the room hears. You can spit solution all day long in a meeting, and people need to hear that. Mostly the people that have been around a while, right? A newcomer is going to look for that. They want to know that you understand.
One of the big ones too is like there was no more excuses. There was no more. I couldn't justify. I couldn't rationalize anymore. I was all out of bullshit. I was all out of bullshit. And it was just like I was just stuck with myself. And I had nothing left.
Right. I mean,
I don't know. Did you feel like that too?
I was done starting over again.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at my last opportunity, and they gave me the opportunity to really work on myself in that 90-day treatment program I was in. So I was able to get to step 5 and finish step 5. And to do that on the 155 question 4 step, which we'll go over in steps, that one really just drove it home. And it really gave me the time to work on me. And I know Jarrod mentioned he was in a 100-day program on that. So to really get some insight and talk about someone that's 15 to come in and just to get the program and stuff. And it's like, when I first come in, you would hear old timers share, it's like, I spilt more than you ever drank and those kind of things. And it's like, you don't need to hear that anymore. I don't hear that being said anymore. Everybody's like, just get in here and get in here now. Get out of the storm of what your life is and what's really happening out there and grab onto the life raft and get moving forward. And that's where I was at. I had given everything to my addiction, 110%. as I'm sure all three of us had, but I had not given recovery 110%. So when I discharged from that place, that's what I've been doing ever since. And here I am now. And I've never been more ready to, and never had as much resource and building upon than I am right now to work my program. So I never forget that. I still have the same journal and everything that I had in that recovery place at my bedside.
Mm.
So I mean, if you don't ever forget that feeling you had and where it was and you were at that moment, I mean, because if you do, we got that easy forgetter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of ideas and we can go back out. So anything else? Anything else
I
on
have a
this one?
question. I have a
All right.
question for Jarrod. When you're dealing with families and
Yeah.
stuff, just generally, because we're talking about bottoms, and I think it's important for like people who are listening and families especially. You can help somebody hit bottom. You can also help somebody continue in that behavior.
Mhm.
So you can help people kill themselves, or you can help them get better.
Mhm.
And in general, what's your idea? What's your take on that? Like, how do you educate a family on things like what are some things that people can do?
So there's a lot, and we covered some of this stuff I think on the first episode. I want to say
A little bit,
maybe,
yeah.
and maybe a little bit on the second one. The simplest way to say, there's a lot of resources out there. So there are things like Al-Anon that are really good for family members to go to. There are things, CODA meetings. There are a lot of these treatment programs out there anymore. Actually, will offer like this was one of the things that came about in the COVID pandemic is they'd start doing like family support groups via Zoom, not just for families that have a loved one under the care of that program, but just universally. And man, rest in peace, Burr Cook. You know what I mean? But that was a man that every single Wednesday night, it was either a Wednesday or Tuesday night for years, would show up and host a meeting for families. I mean, it would get upwards
Oh
of
yeah, that was
50,
awesome.
70
Yeah, I
people.
heard
Yeah,
about that guy. I
yeah,
never
You know,
got
yeah.
to meet him
and
or
those
be a
family
part of
members
it.
in there. And I when it was at Balboa, I used to actually fill in for Burr when he'd go out of town. He'd go up to he'd go up to Mammoth and go fishing and stuff. I'd fill in for him, and I'd got the privilege to run those groups with those
Hmm.
families. And it's like that's there's a lot of support out there for you, and I would encourage you. I mean, reach out. We can find one for you if you don't know like where you can get that, and depending on where you live, even if you live somewhere where there are no resources like that, what I'm saying is you can still get on one via Zoom and still have some connection. And the same thing happens with the families that happens with the addict or the alcoholic. They show up to these things. They start to develop a peer support group
Yep.
of other family members. They relate
Mm-hmm.
because none of the shit that I do when I'm an addict and active addiction is unique. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Might think
Right.
it is. It's not. I mean, there's someone that's been doing that for 100 years before me too. So there's a common thread for the families too. They get together, they bond, and they find a wholeness again. And ultimately, what it is, what their recovery ultimately looks like, is they get to reclaim their life from the chaos because we become, as the addict, we become their only focus in
Mhm.
life. One of the things when I was working in a different level of care, not in detox, when I was reaching out to a family member and knowing that I'm going to be working with this family for the next 30, 60, 90 days, it's like, okay, stop taking their phone calls. They're going to tell you everything that's wrong with this place. They're locking me in the basement. They're not feeding me
Yeah.
anything. They won't let
This
me
is
use
like
my
a
phone, blah,
jail.
blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
manipulation.
Right. It's
Prison.
all manipulation,
Mhm.
right? So stop taking their phone calls. Grab your husband this Friday. Go out to eat. Go to a movie. Turn your phone off. All the things.
Take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself and reclaim your life from this chaos
Right.
with loving, supportive boundaries.
Exactly.
That's it.
Yep.
And that's sounds way easier when it comes out of my mouth than it actually is in practice.
Oh, for sure. But that's where you get.
yeah.
That's where you can find that encouragement from the people around you, the people that have come before you, predecessors that are there with open arms, ready to help.
Mhm.
And I've seen it. I've seen that change people's lives. I have somebody very close to me who's actually in who's actually an Al-Anon, and I mean, the glow up is real. You know, I've watched it transform her life in the last 6 months, and it's been absolutely incredible to watch. And it's really no different from an addict going to a 12-step recovery. It's just it's, but it becomes about
It's self-help
it
stuff.
becomes about taking care of yourself.
It's self-help
And then a
stuff.
byproduct of that is that by taking care of yourself, you're moving away from focusing on the addict, and then the addict has to figure it out. And it actually does, in my opinion at least, help raise that bottom up for the addict to help get them there quicker, hopefully before they die from this thing. And then you know, you guys can go on and live happily ever after, 12-step recovery together.
Hey, whatever.
You know, that's
yeah.
ideal.
Yeah.
That's ideal.
Have some good
Whatever it
boundaries and
is.
everything. And it's kind of funny how Jarrod brought up some of the history of, you know, been hundreds of years and things going on. We're going to be going into a little break here kind of scenario right here with the first little quick snippet. Solomon, if you can hit it with, yes, there you go. The first little snippet on the halfway break here is war stories in recovery and addiction. So this is nothing new that we're doing right here. It's time to jump into the foxhole right here and go into a little bit of history of what's going on right here. We're going to pull up a slide of some history of way back in the day. We're talking about in 1729, opium first arrived in China with Arab merchants right here. Crazy, right? They issued a ban on smoking madak. And that's kind of reminds me of the new age phrase of spadak. A blend of opium and tobacco, comparing indulgence in the drug to a heretic religion. The ban was ineffective back in 1729, guys. By 1836, the Chinese government began to get more serious about enforcing the 1813 ban. It closed opium dens and executed Chinese dealers, but the problem only grew worse. The emperor called for a debate among Chinese officials on how best to deal with the crisis. Opinions were polarized in two sides. Kind of sounds a lot like what's going on now. The Opium Wars in the mid-19th centuries were a critical juncture in modern Chinese history. The first Opium Wars was fought between China and Great Britain from 1839 to 1842. In the Second Opium War from 1856 to 1860, a weakened China fought both Great Britain and France. China lost both of these wars. So this is nothing new, guys. It kind of just gave me a little segue to talk about things. And this is back from 1729, this problem going on with opium and what was going on. And then now for the next two slides, we'll talk about the modern day age right here, moving into the new opioid crisis. Drug overdose death rates. Drug overdose deaths are up 30% year over year over like the last 20 years. The key findings right here showing 96,000 people, over 96,000 people die from drug overdoses in a year. And then 72% of opioids are a factor in 7 out of every 10 deaths are overdose. And then drug overdoses have killed almost 1 million people since 1999. And then the next slide over here is the opioid epidemic is considered a public health emergency with 136 deaths per day and climbing. Almost 50,000 people die every year from opioid overdose. And then over 10 million people misuse opioids in a year. So we're talking about from 1739 to good old 2023. This is nothing new, guys. So, I mean, if you can find some correlations, maybe you can send us some emails on that. I thought it was a quick little snippet we can do and have a little bit of fun about some war stories going on, because when I was really starting to take off in things in like the early 80s and mid 80s, that's when they fired it up with the Don't Say No program and everything, and went to war on us kids.
Just say no.
Yeah, just
Oh,
say
yeah.
no, and go run and tell someone, the Nancy Reagan thing. And so
Fried egg and the thing.
yeah,
This is your brain
yeah,
on drugs.
Yeah, this is your brain on drugs.
That'll stop me.
Yeah. So just a little quick snippet there. Just
By
thought
the
we'd
way,
read off some things.
If this wasn't a disease,
Mhm.
that slogan would have been enough.
Yeah.
People would
Right.
just say no and there wouldn't be any problem.
Didn't work.
Didn't work.
Didn't work at all.
It's still not
No,
working.
no.
So now it's kind of full circle. This stuff happening in China, and then now they say that China's producing all the fentanyl and stuff, and it's crazy. We can get into a big, long, giant
I think we
debate
have
about
a,
it.
I think we have a whole opiate talk
Yeah,
For
coming
sure.
up.
Yeah.
Since
coming
your
up.
guys' main DOCs are opiates,
Yeah,
so
I'd be a dead man for sure. if I
One of the
was
things
today.
I'll say about this just right now before we get onto that thing is before we get onto that subject at some point is there was a time about 9 months ago where I was getting all flustered up about the fentanyl, and because the saddest part for me is when people overdose and die from, it could be a baby, she just touched a surface that the fentanyl was on, and then now she's dead, or somebody who's maybe not even an addict freaking takes a hit of weed and it had fentanyl on it, and now they're in the emergency room and they're being Narcaned. Like that pisses me off. And so the fentanyl thing has really bothered me, the influx and what's been happening the last few years and the amount of overdoses. But I had somebody point out to me about like your basic supply and demand idea. And he's like, "Hey, Rich," he goes, "If there wasn't such a demand, then the supply wouldn't be necessary. You just got to follow the money." And so then it's like looking deeper. It's like, okay, well, why is there such a demand? And what can we do? What can we do to start find a remedy for that? Because what the hell is going on in our society? And this gets deep, right? This can go deep, but I encourage you to not focus so much on the fentanyl, but focus more on what the hell is going on. That we're freaking gluttons for the shit,
Yeah.
and that made me feel better, because I was getting into like terrorism and all kinds of shit with it, and we can go down that rabbit hole. But we got a problem. We have a problem in our society, and part of us doing what we're doing here is kind of trying to find some solution to that, even if it's just on a small scale. Hopefully, it can be a larger scale.
Yeah,
But
they're raising
this
awareness
stuff's important.
across.
Raising awareness.
They just had a fighting fentanyl little show over here in Anaheim with the guy Mike Fiore, who's doing a lot of good stuff. He was just on who's that famous doctor for Dr. Phil. He was just on that one, did a little quick snippet, and it was very powerful. So I got to meet him in the weekend. It was Facing Fentanyl program that he's got out there. Shout out to him. And I got to meet him and a bunch of other people. And I was taking pictures in the Fighting Fentanyl, Facing Fentanyl car and everything. It was a really cool little event and stuff.
But yeah, as far as the history goes too, like I remember being in detox I was in detox with a Vietnam vet, and he's been using heroin since Vietnam.
Right.
That's where he was introduced to it. And
that's
rest
a whole
in peace.
show with American Gangster.
Rest in peace, that man. But it goes back to the history, because you touched on the beginnings of it, and then we touched on where it is currently. But there's definitely, back when they had Bayer cough medicine,
Right. Yep.
and it was like, it had all this. It had like THC in it, and it had
some cocaine.
It had all kinds of stuff in it, all kinds of
some
just
indica,
great
sativa,
shit.
yeah.
That's what my brain goes. Damn, dude, that's a hitter right there.
Yeah.
But back then, and then you move on to like Vietnam when the vets were being introduced to this stuff, and so it's just been ongoing. It's just now I think it's killing people at a more rapid rate. It's different now. It's stronger.
It's definitely an evolution from 1759 to 2023.
For sure.
Hasn't gone away, people. We're still talking about it.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks for engaging us in that quick little snippet. War on drugs, war stories. There's a whole bunch of more war stories to come. We'll be implementing that in future episodes to come up. I was hoping one of the guys were going to hit the firing gun button over there, but they didn't. So maybe in the future here. So, oh, there you go. Cool. All right. The next topic we're going to be hitting right here is spiritual barriers. Jarrod has some things to discuss about that, and we all have a lot of barriers and preconceptions about it when we get into the program. Just know that coming into recovery, we're not interested in separation at all. We're not interested in, we're interested in your story and everything, but we're not interested in how much you know. There's a lot of all types of walks in life. I know people that are preachers. ordained and all types of different people that have gone on their spiritual path, but they're not in there banging people over the head with their spiritual background and everything. And you'll hear a lot of funny sharings like I'm a recovering Catholic and all these different things. So definitely the spirit. I didn't have a spiritual barrier, but my big spiritual barrier was definitely on how the different religions just pawn themselves off on everybody and were in a controlling factor, and that kept me away from things.
Mm.
So definitely over when I had my spiritual awakening, it's definitely grown and it's taken me to a lot of different mentors. But definitely when I went through the 12 and 12, I mean, that just raised my spirituality and a lot of 60 to 63, 85 through 89. And we went through 417
Those are
on the
pages in
daily
a
Those are
book.
pages.
routines.
Those are
And
books that.
those are all bit different pages that are in recovery that you'll be exposed to. So reading those on a daily basis for many years and dropping it down from my head to my heart and just always being an open-minded.
That's
So
key.
that's one thing that we want you to do is always be open-minded and not to be closed off because not no segregation or secular religion out there. In my opinion, has all the answers to everything. So definitely, I like to take a little bit of everything. I kind of look at the program as a little bit of all the greatest wisdom and keynotes crammed into one program that I've found so far. So I know that everybody's got their own personal journey with that. And for me, I had shared before, my upbringing in spirituality or religion was all, if your grandmother asks you if you believe in God, just tell her yes. And that was my big exposure. And I think maybe I was taken to church a couple times. So I had a lot of barriers that I could go into. But I love what Jarrod shared on the last one. It's like you can't be mad at God and not believe in God all in the same sentence. So one of the things that happened to me when I was younger, we were partying in front of my friend's pad up the street from where I was living, and then one of the neighbors said they were going to call the cops on us. Well, they did. So a long story. So they had shown up with the police dogs, and I was in my 1969 Chevy party van, and they said, "Get the hell in your van!" And my buddy was outside, and they've had my other two friends handcuffed on the curb, and they proceeded to take the dog and attack my friend with the dog right in front of his parents' house. And I mean, we weren't doing anything besides just drinking out in front of them. I didn't know that they were just scaring the crap out of him. He was screaming and yelling for his life. So I couldn't see out of the back window of this van. And then they were knocking, the other officer was knocking on it and saying, "You're next. We're sending this dog in here next." And I was like, I reached out to God at that point because I thought they were killing my friend. It sounded like it.
Yeah, that's
And I was like, oh my God, I was like, God, please help me. And that was like one of the first times because there was some different times where I had no religious upbringing or anything. And it was an actual cry out to a higher power. And I reflected on that later and was like, where did that come from? In some different scenarios,
mm,
crying out into my basic instinct over the years. And that wouldn't have been the last time, but that was the first time that I remember. I was pretty young, and then there were some times before that and after that too. But I was like kind of like an eye opener. It was like, why was I reverting and praying and screaming out for God to help
mm,
me? So that was kind of like a softening when I went through my history when I was at my last treatment program, when I went over the 155 question 4 step. So there was a lot of breadcrumbs. They say follow the breadcrumbs and the spirituality and all that stuff. So I was able to give enough time to have enough open mind. And it's like I'm crying out at the most basic, fundamental nature of who I am as a person to help from a higher power. And that was pretty powerful for me to realize that. So, and that I know a lot of other people, I've seen other people do it too that were supposedly some of the most atheist people you could run into. Because,
that's an incredible perspective. I mean, thank you for sharing that because um, that actually was really helpful to me just now to hear that because I mean, I'll be open about it. Like I struggle with the spirituality thing, but what I do know um, is that it is instinctual, And I can think back, similar to you, at some of the darkest times in my life, even though I wasn't religious or even though I didn't necessarily have a relationship with a God, like when you got nothing else, there's a part of you that wants to reach out for something. And the thing is with the spirituality thing, is no matter what label we put on it, no matter what thing we call it, it usually has some similar characteristics. No matter which, if you're looking in the Western world, the Eastern world, there's similar characteristics,
Yes.
similar spiritual principles we can attach to whatever we call our higher power, and that varies from, or it's the same, around the same, from person to person across the world. And so there is an instinctual, there's something about being human, and there's like something within the human instinct that we want to seek, we want to find answers. And I think the key for me has just been willingness to seek, and one of the barriers, if we're going to talk about barriers, is lacking open-mindedness, and then lack of willingness to seek. Those are two big ones. And so these are some things that I struggle with, that I need to constantly check myself, because I'm such a selfish person that it's so easy. It's so easy for me to just rely on myself, man. And I have a big ego, and I have to continually check that part of myself, and really force myself to go the other way. Because especially when things are going good, when shit's going good, I don't feel like I need to rely on anything but myself.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, and then it gets dark, and all of a sudden my whole attitude changes. So I know, Jared, man,
Taking
Jared,
credit
this is
again.
your wheelhouse, bro, because I just
Dude,
feel like you're
I
you're such a
just
spiritual dude,
oh my god.
freaking
Stop.
legend.
I think I just heard the
No, you are.
ohm. Do we have an ohm button on that thing?
No,
No,
there's no
but
own button.
no, but when I think about you, Jared, like seriously, man, like when I think about you and just the way you operate and the way you do your recovery, I think about the spirituality piece is that you just do it well. You do it well
Thank you.
from where I'm standing, and I don't know how you feel about that. That's just from the outside looking in.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's really odd and sweet to hear. Um, this whole thing, as you guys are talking, I'm just like thinking about so many examples of the whole topic. Really, the idea of a God. I mean, I think it's just because I was absolutely so fucking resistant that all of the once my mind was open just a little,
It
ever
flooded
since
in, huh?
then, it's like the
Yeah.
floodgates opened, and I still haven't landed on any, one belief system or anything like that that's absolute in my mind. But
And that's okay.
it's okay, and literally AA and people in recovery are the ones that did that for me, because I certainly couldn't do it.
Mhm.
And at the end of I think it was the Mother's Day podcast that we did, I brought that up. The dude that told me that, I'll never forget him. He's dead now. He was one of these old timers, but he's the one that told me, Jared, you can't be angry at God and not believe there is one. I'm
Yeah.
like, that was one of those things where I was all, a half hour later on the drive home, I was like, that motherfucker like,
Change the whole game.
blew my mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just broke my whole
Yeah.
brain and my soul and
Pissed you
everything.
off a little bit.
I call them
But-
soul punches.
Yeah.
There was a thing. So I promised I would talk a little bit about that, and I think
Okay.
we've got a little bit of time.
Mhm.
Can I
Yeah, we got
say
some time. You
stuff
see
on
it
that?
clicking down right there.
Cool. So being as resistant as I was, I didn't realize how resistant I actually was. And that's that alcoholic arrogance. You know what I mean? My life was in absolute ruins, shambles. And one of my first groups that I walked into at the treatment center in Anaheim, beautiful property. I walked in there, sat down, and this dude pulls up outside, Donald Trump hair, like all this jewelry on, in a suit. Old guy pulls up in his Lexus and comes in to run the group. And he looked like a televangelist. Like, he seriously looked like a preacher. And that's where my brain went.
It's over by the Crystal
he-
Cathedral, right?
Yeah, it was actually over by the Crystal
You must have
Cathedral.
just drove across the street
And
from
and the guy walks in the room to do this group, and the first question he asked the group is, who hit their knees to pray this morning? And I was like, oh, here we go. all right. And this is the treatment center that I've landed in. I'm at the lowest point in my life, you know, and here I am judging this dude.
Right. Of course.
Judge him. Oh yeah. So anyway, he asked that question. Everybody in the group raised their hand. I'm like, fucking liars. Like, you guys are all lying. And I didn't. And he asked me, how come you didn't hit your knees to pray this morning? This is the first time really meeting this guy. You know, I'm like, I told him, I'm like, well, first of all, I don't pray. And if I was going to pray, it definitely wouldn't be for my knees.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I know now, looking back at it with that alcoholic arrogance, I was looking for a fight with this dude.
Oh yeah.
You know
Oh
what
yeah.
I
I was
mean?
gonna say, like, I'm kind of bothered right now.
Yeah, you should be. It was
Don't you know who
awful.
you're talking to?
Yeah. I was kind of looking for a fight with this dude, and he didn't bite.
Mm.
He went about, did the rest of his group, ignored me, or at least that was my impression, you know. And then the group ended. It was actually a really good group. And then I was outside on the patio smoking afterwards, and he approached me and he asked me a question no one had ever asked me before.
Mm.
It was like the first thing that came out of his mouth was, hey, can you tell me about a time when you were a kid where you felt the presence of something greater than yourself? And it was weird how fast it came to me. And what came up was my dad, before I was born, used to be a park ranger up in Humboldt County at Richardson's Grove. And I remember when I was a kid, I still don't know how old I was, but this all came flooding in as this dude asked me the question. And my dad had taken me up there to stay in a cabin, and we were gonna like kind of hang out for the weekend or whatever it was in Richardson's Grove. And he walked me out to these redwood trees. And I'm a little kid, and I remember standing at the base of this tree. It was the biggest thing I'd ever seen in my life to that point. I'm standing at the base of this tree, and I'm looking up at, I can't see the top of it. It had kind of been like either rain or, you know, coastal moisture overnight. The sun was out, and the tree was kind of steaming. And I remember my dad telling me, hey, this thing's alive, just like you and me are alive. And it breathes. And what it breathes out, we have to have to live. We breathe it in. And I remember just being in awe, first of all, at the sheer size of this thing and just the topic of what he was talking about and all that. But also, I felt the presence of that tree. And I don't know how else to explain it. But I told this man that. And he's just smiling the whole time. His name's Jim, by the way. He's smiling the whole time. And so then he knew enough, I think, about just my alcoholic arrogance, egomaniac BS. He said, I'm going to challenge you with something. And I think he knew if he challenged me that I would do it just to prove him wrong. So he said, I want you to hit your knees every single morning and every single night for the next 2 weeks. And if you don't notice a significant change in the way that you feel about the idea of a higher power, and you don't just feel different and better in general, you don't ever have to do it again. And I was still pretty skeptical and probably wasn't going to do it. But then he said this to me, and it made all the difference in the world. I don't know why. It's one of those things, one of those moments in time that changed my life forever. Call it God, call it whatever you want. He said, Jarrod, I want you to think of your knees as the prongs on the end of an electrical cord, and the ground is the socket. And when you hit your knees, you plug into the power of the universe for the day. I don't know where he got it, that I was kind of a crunchy guy, like a little bit of a granola cruncher.
Well, you told him the redwood story.
Yeah. See?
Hey,
Still,
dude.
Still smoked.
So I'm gonna work on grounding with this guy.
So that's what he challenged me with. I started to do it, and I did it, and it worked.
Awesome.
And when I say it worked, what I mean is it allowed for my closed mind to open just enough to start taking an action. And anymore, if I'm to boil down my spirituality or my variety of it, 100% my spirituality is action-based. If I don't do something, I get nothing. So my daily routine is a simple one, and then I'll shut up and let you guys talk. because I don't want to take up too much time and jeopardize this, but
2 hours later.
Got him.
2 hours
Got
later,
him.
you got it.
Yeah.
That was
Nah,
a
bring it, bro.
pre-prep.
You're killing it right
now.
the
Let's go.
daily,
Prep,
the daily
bro.
routine is a simple one, man. I roll out of
Yeah.
bed, I hit my knees, say a quick prayer. The nature of the prayer, what I say, I don't believe is important. I have my own variety of it, though. I say it. And anymore, it's the third step prayer. I'm sure to say that every single morning. From my knees. I plug into the power of the universe for the day. The next thing I need to go do is I need to go shave my face, except for right here, because I have a dirty
Yeah.
trucker stash.
Yeah.
But do something that I didn't used to do in active addiction, like take a freaking shower, be a human being,
Brush your
my
grill.
teeth, right? All that kind of stuff.
Get some daily momentum. Make your bed.
So that, and there we go. This dude, the same dude that challenged me with the knee thing,
Mhm.
he's the owner of the treatment center.
Oh.
That dude would show up. He didn't have to show up. He had an entire staff. But that dude would show up every single day, and he'd walk through every single room, and he'd see if your bed was made. And if your bed wasn't made, you were going out to the porch. And you were going to have a conversation with Jim
It's important.
or the staff.
Mhm.
And so, make my bed. Anymore, there's the new piece of meditation that's also been thrown into the mix. But the routine in the morning for me is by far the most important thing I do, and I'll tell you why. By the time I walk out my door, if I've done those things, I can guarantee you, I am not getting drunk or loaded that day. And
Right.
I will hit the pillow sober. Right?
Right.
So it's a daily routine of spiritual action. You can put together your own variety of it. That's just kind of what they showed me, and it worked really, really well. And then years
and you've taken that
years.
routine through your life.
Yeah, and
Just
by the
like
way,
my routine and everybody's routine. And
yeah,
why would you stop doing your routine is the kind of thing. It's like, oh, I'm good. Like what Rich was sharing.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, you're good, but for how long are you good?
Yeah.
So when we talk about the prelapse, most people are saying, well,
That's the stuff that
when was
falls
your
off.
last time you prayed? When were you connected? How was your new life going? And then you started slipping back to your old life.
right.
And here you are once again.
I already
And you're
told you
living your
guys.
old predictable past.
Before that relapse, I only made it 2 weeks after the hitting my knees and there's routine fell off before I was loaded.
Ah, 2
Now,
weeks.
does that speak? I wonder if that speaks more to. Does that speak more to you got loaded because you stopped praying, or you stopped praying because you wanted to get loaded? And that's complex. That's complex, and that's pretty deep. But
takes a lot of
I don't know what comes
self-awareness.
first, the chicken or the egg on that one. I'm not
Well,
real sure.
I was well into
but
the relapse.
Yeah,
and
you were
everything.
already in there.
Yeah,
you were already
just mentally
yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How much more time do we got, Solomon?
We got about 8 minutes.
Okay. All right. So we talk about on the next.
Thanks for sharing
kinda-
that.
Sure.
That was awesome.
Definitely. That's one of the things that Jarrod had shared, running a group and stuff like that. That I was like, okay, I mean, this guy's for real, and a lot of different things like that over the time we've spent together, getting to know each other and stuff like that. So definitely important with your morning routine. We've talked about hitting bottom, and we're talking about moving forward and getting into action. And the different people, you never know who's going to be what they would call your Eskimo, or who's going to be the one to drop the knowledge. And it's usually your higher power showing you that your judgment and your character radar is wrong. You never know where it's going to come from or who it's going to do it. And it's like, I mean, Jarrod shared the story. He's character assassinating this dude right off the thing, and you just never know who's that person. You never know who people are, or where they come from, or their background story, financial status, and everything. So, I mean, he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to show up. I mean, the treatment center where I went through too, he would show up to the weekly meeting at the Sober Living and just see where his guys were. And he was interested in what was going on. There's a lot of good people out there like that. And my daily routine, I usually I've never been on the knee prayer or anything like that, but I'm always into that vibe, into that scenario. I do a lot of guided meditations. So, I mean, usually all my mentors and new age and all of that stuff is guided. But at first, I mean, I would have my whole routine. I still have it by my bedside. It has a 3rd and 7th step prayer in there, the long form of the acceptance and the long form of the serenity prayer. And it has the prayer of St. Francis in there,
Oh,
and
that's
it's so powerful. I'm waking up every morning, and we talked about on that the last podcast that we did about the different and how your brain waves connect with it, and your whole body, mind, and spirit, and everything. There's a whole science out there now.
Yeah.
This has been scientifically proven. And I remember an old thing on Time magazine that said, "Does God and science conflict?" And back then, it was basically a no. And now in the new age, since they've been monitoring and assessing the body and putting all the new age technology on going inward and monitoring it during deep state meditations and all that stuff, what's going on now, it's unbelievable. It is a positive 100% yes, it is true and going on. But you're not going to hear that in the mainstream. There's just unbelievable stuff going on right now with meditation and spontaneous healings and all of these great peoples and mentors just out there. But it's always been going on. It's just never been pushed into
forever.
mainstream.
You know,
Yes,
it's
it's
one of the
not
most
anything
beautiful
new, but
things.
now they have the science to prove it.
Right.
So
I mean, so when we're talking about like the routines and my routines have been hit and miss, you know, and but what I'll say that I've gotten from them, and this is why they're so important, is I've been able to plug in a way of thinking that's not my own, because my default way of thinking when I get up in the morning is not good right out the gate.
Yeah.
And then that part of me is just always going to be a part of me. But through the routine and plugging in some positivity with some positive prayers, and maybe even like a morning meditation reading. There's an NA one called Just for Today. There's a
Right.
bunch of other ones out
I
there,
get all
recovery
that stuff
related.
all day.
But it helps me start my day off with some positive thoughts and a positive perspective that I can carry with me throughout the day. And then through doing that over time, I've developed a way of thinking that is now sort of new. That old part of me is still there, but I also have this other part that I can choose to tap into that's more of a positive perspective. And I've literally been educated on these different perspectives that I didn't have before coming into recovery. And so walking through a day with that kind of outlook helps me stay clean.
Right.
Not only does it help me stay clean, it helps keep me from doing damage to those around me, and harming my relationships, and harming myself with the way I think about myself, and all of these things that I came in here with, and that are still very much a part of me. And so for if we're talking about routines, I have a meditation that I read at night. It's called Nightlight. And I really like that one. I like the morning ones, but I also like the night ones, because it's like I do the one in the morning and then I do the one at night. So it's like I have
You're
we
starting it off and
yeah,
wrapping it up
absolutely. And the
into
night
a
ones,
nice little package.
the night ones are more of like, the morning ones are like this. It's a look forward into your day, okay, and it's a perspective for the day. It's something you can carry with you, an attitude you can carry with you, essentially, something to chew on for the day. And then the nighttime readings are more of a reflection before you go to bed, and that's
Right.
it's a nice little setup. And the thing is in recovery, man, we have this shit handed to us. There's literally books. There's little books. They're like $10, and they can change the game, or 2-minute meditations. I'm not a huge meditation guy, but 2-minute meditations I can do, and I can tell you they've been absolutely powerful for me when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm not in control of my body anymore, and that anxiety takes over.
Right.
They help recenter me, and it's 2 minutes. It's low commitment, and I'm good with that. That's the
commitment.
that's the kind of meditation that attracts me.
Yeah.
At this point in my recovery, 2 minutes I can do. You tell me to meditate for an hour, I might fight that a little bit. So those are some things that I use that have been very powerful for me, and those are the reasons that I use them, is because they help center me and help keep me the best version of myself, I guess.
All right,
So-
cool. So we definitely hit some good topics today. We're going to be winding it up. We're going to do another call to action here on the emails. Solomon, pull that up. You guys can contact us again, info@supersoberpodcast.org, info@f3recovery.org. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, things you want us to tap into, things that you have to help out that work for you. We want you guys to have some skin in the game here, some actual banter back and forth away from the podcast. And also wanted to shout out on the f3recovery.org is a story that I wrote for recovery. It's called The Detox. And it's a story of addiction, the deadliest disease that man has ever known. And it's a streaming series. I wrote it a couple years ago. If anybody knows anybody in Hollywood, since there's a Writers Guild Association strike going on, maybe
Here's your
you can
guy.
go to it. So if you go to f3recovery.org, you'll see it. It says The Detox. It's the trailer. You'll see the little quick snippet on there, a little movie of it, and you'll see the one sheet. So that's called pitch deck for people that aren't aware in the industry of what that's called. And it'll give you a brief description of what the pilot episode is. It's never been done before. This is kind of a process of when you see the intervention show. So when you see the intervention show, you get everybody going, and then they send them into treatment, and then they show 30, 60, 90 days later. This is that story. So this is all the background story of what you don't know is happening in treatment centers and everything in between. So from what I've never seen this done before, so this was a divine project that came to me to do. So my higher power actually asked me to write this, so I did. So if anybody has anybody that might be interested in seeing that or whatever, this will be the first shout out on the about the detox. So thanks for letting us share. Thanks for doing another podcast with us, everybody. We appreciate you, and we're just going to keep on keeping on.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Super Sober Podcast. Go to our website at f3recovery.org. That's F3Recovery, all one word, .org. We're turning fight, flight, and freeze into free form and flow through practicing the 12 steps and staying accountable to change. Don't forget to keep on keeping on.